Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old. You're about to hear the story of how my family won $2.5 billion and then tried to erase me from existence as if I'd never been a part of it. What happened next was even worse than being cut out of the money. It was about my dignity, my truth, and fighting back against the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, or like your contributions were deliberately ignored, please hit the like button on this video. Let me know where you're watching from the comments below. I'd love to see who this reaches. And if you want to hear more stories like this, remember to subscribe. Now, let me tell you everything that happened. It all started, as most painful family sagas do, with a dream. Not just a dream, but a vision, a project that consumed years of my life, alongside my family. My parents, my older brother Daniel, and me. We were a unit or so, I believed. We pooled our resources, our skills, our time, into building something revolutionary. It was a tech venture, something designed to streamline an incredibly complex industry. My background was in system architecture and development. I was the one who designed the core framework, wrote the bulk of the code, and troubleshot the inevitable, soul-crushing bugs that tried to kill us in the early days. Daniel handled the initial marketing and client relations, leveraging his network. My father, bless his pragmatic heart, managed the finances and legal structure, while my mother was the glue, keeping us fed, relatively sane, and dealing with the logistical chaos of a startup run mostly from our cramped home office. We started small, bootstrapped with every penny we could scrape together, borrowing against our futures. There were years of ramen noodles, sleepless nights fueled by cheap coffee, and the constant hum of server fans in the background. We poured everything into this. I was in my mid-20s when we began. While my friends were starting careers, traveling, dating, I was hunched over a keyboard, lines of code blurring into my vision, the weight of our shared ambition heavy on my shoulders. There was a camaraderie then, a sense that we were truly in this together, building something that could change our lives. My parents would tell everyone how brilliant I was, how Daniel was the marketing whiz, how Dad kept the ship afloat. We were a team, a family enterprise. It felt good. It felt right. The product we built was complex, intricate, and incredibly efficient. I remember the day we finally launched the beta. It was terrifying. What if it failed? What if the years of work were for nothing? But it didn't fail. It worked. And it worked better than anything else on the market. We started getting our first clients, small ones at first, then bigger ones. The revenue grew, slowly but surely. We hired a few employees, moved into a modest office space. Things were happening. The dream felt like it was becoming a reality. Over the next few years, the growth accelerated. We scaled up, refining the product based on client feedback. This is where my role became even more critical. I wasn't just maintaining the system. I was constantly innovating, adding new features, ensuring scalability and security. I hired and managed a small team of developers, mentoring them, fostering the culture of innovation that I believed was our edge. Daniel focused on expanding our market reach, bringing in larger contracts. My father managed the growing finances, securing investments. My mother handled human resources and operations, making sure the office ran smoothly. We each had our defined roles, essential pieces of the puzzle. But somewhere along the way, the dynamic began to shift. Subtly at first. When investors came to visit, Daniel was always presented as the face of the company, the visionary salesman. My father was the financial genius. My mother was the diligent operator. And I was the tech person. The language used to describe my role started to feel reductive. As if I just kept the computers running, rather than having designed the very engine of the business. I brushed it off initially. Maybe it was just easier for them to explain to non-technical people. Maybe I was being sensitive. The shift became more pronounced as the company grew more valuable. When we pitched to potential acquirers, the narrative solidified. Daniel had the charisma, the vision. Father had the financial acumen that made us a safe bet. Mother had built the stable operations. My contribution was increasingly framed as purely technical execution, implementing their vision. I remember one meeting specifically with a potential buyer. The lead negotiator asked about the core technology, its architecture. Daniel deferred to me, of course, because he couldn't explain it. I launched into a detailed explanation of the system I had built from the ground up, the proprietary algorithms, the innovative infrastructure. I spoke with passion and expertise. When I finished, the negotiator looked impressed. But before he could ask a follow-up question, my father jumped in, saying something like, "Yes, Emily is very good with computers. Daniel is the one who saw the need for this, though, the one who truly understood the market potential." It was like a cold shower. My contribution was instantly diminished, framed as merely technical support for Daniel's grand idea. Later, I brought it up to my father. "Dad," I said, "when I'm explaining the tech, can you please let me finish? And maybe emphasize that I designed it, not just that I'm good with computers?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Emily, don't be so sensitive. It's just easier to explain it that way. Daniel's the face he always has been. People understand sales and vision. They don't need to know the nitty-gritty code." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Nitty-gritty code? It was the foundation. This wasn't just about ego. It was about ownership. About recognition. My mother, usually my biggest champion, also started echoing this narrative. "You know how it is, Emily. Daniel is the natural leader. You prefer to be behind the scenes anyway, don't you?" Behind the scenes? I was the head of development, leading a team, making critical architectural decisions that determine the company's future. But they had decided on a narrative, and they were sticking to it. My brother Daniel, meanwhile, seemed increasingly comfortable taking sole credit for the strategic direction and innovation. He'd talk in interviews about my vision and my team, glossing over the fact that my team was the development department I had built and led, and my vision often incorporated fundamental design principles I had introduced years before. He didn't actively malicious initially. It felt more like a casual, entitled appropriation, born of years of being the favored, more outgoing child. But as the stakes got higher, his casual appropriation started to feel deliberate. I tried talking to him too. "Hey Daniel," I said one afternoon, "I noticed in that article, you didn't mention that I designed the core platform. You just talked about the tech team," he shrugged. "Yeah, well, gotta keep it high level for the press. People want to hear about leadership. I was leading the most critical department. It felt like I was hitting my head against a wall. The company continued to grow, its value skyrocketing. There were offers for acquisitions, small ones at first, then increasingly significant ones. My family, father, mother, and Daniel formed a united front in these negotiations. I was involved, of course, to explain the technical side and assess the potential buyer's understanding and plans for the technology. But my involvement felt like a technical consultant rather than a founder. Decisions about valuation, structure, and the future of the company were made primarily between the three of them. My opinion was sought on technical feasibility, but rarely on the overall direction or, crucially, the equity split among the founders. We hadn't formalized founder equity in the very beginning. We were family after all. We trusted each other implicitly. That trust, I would come to learn, was a precious and fragile thing, easily shattered by the prospect of immense wealth. Discussions about splitting potential payouts were vague. "We'll figure it out, Emily," father would say. "Family takes care of family," Daniel would agree, adding, "Yeah, don't worry about the numbers now. We're a team." Mother would smile, reinforcing the family-first sentiment. I wanted to trust them. They were my family. The acquisition offer that changed everything came from a massive, multinational corporation. It was for $2.5 billion. It was an almost incomprehensible sum. We were ecstatic. We celebrated. There were tears, hugs, promises of a comfortable future for all of us, for generations. In that moment, it felt like the years of sacrifice, the ramen, the sleepless nights had all paid off, and we had done it together. Then came the negotiations for the final deal. This is where things got cold, professional, and utterly brutal. The acquiring company's lawyers needed to formalize everything, including the ownership structure and the payout distribution among the founding team. My family held meetings about this without me. They said it was financial and legal stuff that father needed to handle with Daniel. I asked to be included. After all, I was a founder. I had built the core product. I had led the tech team for years. Don't worry, Emily, father said, his tone dismissive. We've got it handled. It's all sorted. Sorted how? When the initial draft of the agreement reached me, my hands trembled as I read it. It listed the founders: my father, my mother, Daniel. My name was listed separately, not as a founder, but as a key employee with a significant bonus package tied to staying on for a few years. The equity split among them was substantial and seemingly arbitrary, favoring Daniel and father, with mother getting a smaller, but still significant share. My share, the bonus, was a pittance compared to theirs. A fraction of 1% of the total acquisition value. It wasn't even enough to be considered a rounding error on $2.5 billion. It was insulting. It was devastating. I confronted them. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd celebrated the news of the acquisition just weeks before. The air was thick with tension. What is this? I asked, holding up the document. Why am I not listed as a founder? Why is my share so small? Father leaned back in his chair, looking annoyingly calm. Emily, we discussed this. This is how we decided to structure it. Discussed? You had meetings without me. Well, we didn't want to bother you with the complex financial details, Mother chimed in, her voice sweet but firm. Your strength is the technology, dear. The numbers are really your father and Daniel's domain. My domain was building the company that made the numbers possible. I retorted, my voice rising. I designed the core product. I led the development. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. Emily, look, we know you worked hard. But the vision, the market strategy, the relationships, that was the real value. Anyone could have coded it. Anyone could have coded it? I stared at him, aghast. Do you have any idea the complexity? The intellectual property? The years of intricate development. Details, Emily. Father cut in sharply. At this level, it's about the big picture. Daniel was the face. I managed the money. Mother kept things running. You were the indispensable technician. And you are being compensated generously for your technical contributions. Generously? Compared to $2.5 billion? It was crumbs. You're erasing me, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You're pretending I wasn't a founder. You're pretending my work was just technical support. Don't be dramatic, Emily, Mother said, her tone shifting from sweet to impatient. We're recognizing your contribution. This bonus is more money than you've ever seen in your life. It's not about the amount of money. It's about the principle. It's about the truth. My voice cracked. We built this together. We were a team. And now you're cutting me out, rewriting history. History is written by the victors, Father said, a chillingly cold smile touching his lips. And we're the ones negotiating the deal. This is the structure. Take the bonus, Emily. Be happy with it. You'll be set for life. Set for life on a bonus. I repeated, the words tasting like ash. While you split billions. You weren't a founder, not in the traditional sense, Daniel stated, his eyes avoiding mine. You were the lead developer. A brilliant one. Sure, but Father and I took the initial financial risks, the leadership risks. The initial financial risks? I had foregone a salary for years, lived on nothing, invested every hour of my life. Leadership risks? I led the development team that built the product. It was a twisted, convenient redefinition of reality. The confrontation devolved from there. Tears turned to shouting. Accusations flew. They accused me of being greedy, of not understanding business, of being ungrateful. I accused them of betrayal, of lying, of theft. It was ugly, heartbreaking, and irreparable. I walked out of that house that day, the house I grew up in, the house where we had built our dream, and knew things would never be the same. I hired a lawyer. A good one. She listened patiently as I laid out the story, the years of work, the promises, the sudden exclusion. She reviewed the initial business formation documents, the emails, the corporate minutes, or lack thereof regarding equity. It was complicated. Because we were family and had operated on trust, the formal legal structure of the initial partnership was loose. My role was undeniable in the company's success, documented in countless lines of code and project plans, but proving my status as a founder in a legally binding sense, distinct from a highly valued early employee, was challenging, especially when the other key players were a united front against me. My lawyer advised me on the options. A lawsuit would be lengthy, expensive, and emotionally draining. It would pit me directly against my family in court, airing all our dirty laundry. Even if I won, proving my exact percentage of founding equity after the fact would be difficult. The alternative was to try and negotiate, but my family had shown zero willingness to budge. They saw me as a disgruntled employee trying to extort more money. While my lawyer explored legal avenues, the emotional pain was immense. My own family, the people who had raised me, who I had worked alongside for years, had turned on me with stunning speed and ruthlessness the moment truly life-changing money was on the table. They stopped taking my calls. They sent terse emails through their lawyers or father, reiterating their position. I was a valued former employee being offered a generous bonus. They started spreading a narrative to extended family and mutual acquaintances that I was being unreasonable, demanding, trying to take money that wasn't rightfully mine, disrupting the family's good fortune out of spite. They painted me as the villain. This misrepresentation was almost worse than the financial betrayal. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my reputation, my integrity, my very identity as a co-creator of the company. They were systematically minimizing my role, rewriting the past to justify their actions in the present. I received calls from well-meaning aunts or uncles who had clearly heard their version of events. "Emily, honey, your parents are so worried about you. This money is a wonderful thing. Don't let greed tear the family apart." Greed? They were keeping billions. The negotiations with the acquiring company were proceeding. My lawyer warned me that if I pursued a lawsuit, it could potentially delay or even jeopardize the acquisition, which might be leverage, but could also backfire spectacularly and leave me with nothing. The acquiring company was eager to close the deal and wanted a clean ownership structure. My family presented themselves as the sole, undisputed founders. I felt cornered, hurt, angry, and increasingly isolated. How could I fight against my own family, who controlled the narrative and the finances? How could I prove my worth, my founding contribution, when they were actively denying it and painting me as unstable or greedy? The idea of revealing their corruption began to form. Not just the corruption of how they were handling the acquisition money, but the corruption of their story, the corruption of their familial duty and love. What leverage did I have? I had the truth. I had documented proof of my technical leadership, emails, project management data, early code repositories. I had the names of employees I had hired and managed, people who knew my role. I also knew where the bodies were buried, so to speak, regarding some of the company's early struggles and perhaps some less than transparent dealings father had managed financially. But using that kind of information felt dangerous, like playing their game. My primary leverage was the technical architecture itself. The system I built was complex and contained proprietary elements only I, and perhaps a few members of my original team, truly understood at a fundamental level. While the acquiring company would gain access to the code, transferring the deep institutional knowledge and ensuring a smooth transition often required the cooperation of the key technical minds. My family had assured the buyers that I, as a key employee with a large bonus, would stay on and facilitate this. But I had no intention of doing that. My bonus was contingent on staying, yes, but the psychological cost of working for them after this betrayal was unthinkable. My lawyer advised against anything that could be construed as extortion or interfering with the deal directly through threats. But there were ethical lines my family had crossed, potentially legal ones too, in misrepresenting the company's history and ownership to the buyers and investors. My family had presented themselves as the sole entrepreneurial force, while my crucial technical foundation was minimized. The thought consumed me. How do I reclaim my story? How do I force them, and the world, to see the truth of what I did? Simply accepting the bonus and walking away felt like accepting their lie, validating their erasure. I couldn't do it. The betrayal was too deep, the insult too profound. I decided I needed to reveal the truth, not just to hurt them, but to heal myself, to regain my sense of self-worth that they were trying to strip away. The corruption wasn't just financial, it was moral. They were corrupting the narrative of our shared history for personal gain. I started gathering every piece of evidence I had. Emails discussing the initial concept where my technical ideas were foundational. Early diagrams and system architecture plans in my handwriting. Communication logs with Daniel and Father, where I was clearly presented as the lead developer and technical visionary. Testimonials from early employees about my leadership and technical prowess. It was overwhelming, a painful reliving of years of work that was now being denied. The deadline for the acquisition was fast approaching. My family was putting immense pressure on me to sign the employee agreement with the bonus. They threatened to withhold the bonus entirely if I didn't cooperate. They threatened legal action for disrupting the deal, claiming I was damaging the company's value. They used every manipulative tactic in their arsenal. "You're hurting the family, Emily," Mother would plead, alternating with Father's booming threats. Daniel was mostly silent, letting our parents do the heavy lifting, a cowardice that cut me deeply. My lawyer suggested one last attempt at negotiation. She sent a strongly worded letter detailing my contributions, outlining the potential legal challenges my family could face if they continued to misrepresent the founding team, and proposing a more equitable settlement, not equal to theirs, necessarily, but a significant, multi-million-dollar figure that acknowledged my foundational role. Their response was swift and negative. They refused to negotiate, reiterating the bonus offer and increasing the threats. They truly believed I had no leverage. But I did. My leverage wasn't financial or legal in the traditional sense. It was the truth and the potential reputational damage to them and the company. The acquiring company, while eager to close, was also wary of any hidden liabilities or disputes that could arise post-acquisition. A public dispute about the founding team, particularly involving accusations of misrepresentation and unfair treatment of the core technical mind, could cause headaches. I drafted a detailed account of my role, the founding story as I knew it, the gradual exclusion, and the final, blatant attempt to erase me from the narrative and the financial rewards. I included copies of key documents, anonymizing sensitive client information but leaving enough detail to be credible. I didn't frame it just about the money, but about the betrayal of trust, the rewriting of history, and the ethical implications of how they treated me. I decided to share this information, not with the press initially, but with a few key people within the acquiring company whom I had built a rapport with during the diligence phase. People who respected my technical expertise and understood the critical role I played. I sent them an email, attaching the document. I stated clearly that I would not be staying with the company post-acquisition under the current terms, and that there was a significant dispute regarding the true founding team and the equity split. I explained that I felt it was necessary to provide them with accurate information regarding the company's history and the current unresolved dispute among the original team, as it might impact the transition and future operations, particularly regarding the deep technical knowledge residing with me. The reaction was immediate. Not from my family, but from the acquiring company. The deal suddenly stalled. They were understandably concerned. They initiated urgent calls with my family, demanding clarification and resolution. They didn't want to inherit a messy, potentially public, family feud that could also disrupt the integration of the technology. This finally got my family's attention. The threat of the multi-billion-dollar deal collapsing was the only thing that seemed to matter to them. They called me furious. Father's voice was booming, full of rage. "What have you done, Emily? You're going to ruin everything." I told the truth, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The truth. You're spreading lies. You're interfering with a legal transaction. I am providing facts about the company's founding history that you conveniently omitted." I corrected him. "Facts about my role." Daniel got on the phone, his tone pleading but still condescending.
Encomió.
"Don't be like this. We can still work this out." "Work what out, Daniel?" I asked. You told the buyers that I was just a key employee, not a founder. You planned to take billions and give me peanuts. You tried to erase me. There's nothing to work out unless you're ready to acknowledge the truth and correct this. Mother started crying in the background. Emily, please. We're your family. Don't do this to us. You did this to me, I said, my voice breaking. You broke the family when you decided money was more important than integrity or loyalty. The acquiring company, seeing the depth of the dispute and my unwillingness to back down or stay on as an employee under the current terms, put the deal on hold. They informed my family that they needed this issue resolved to their satisfaction, including a clear and undisputed ownership structure and a plan for technical transition that didn't rely on a hostile former employee. My family was in a panic. Billions were on the line. They finally, begrudgingly, agreed to negotiate. This time, my lawyer was present and we met on neutral territory. It was tense, difficult, and emotionally draining. They still tried to minimize my role, but now they were negotiating from a position of weakness. I had the leverage of truth and my indispensable technical knowledge. The negotiation wasn't about getting an equal split. That was legally and practically impossible given the initial structure and their united front. It was about getting fair recognition and compensation for my foundational contribution, for the years of my life I had invested, for the betrayal I had endured. My lawyer argued powerfully, presenting the evidence I had gathered, highlighting the risk to the deal if they continued to deny my role. After days of fraught discussions, back and forth through lawyers, a settlement was reached. It was a confidential agreement. It acknowledged my critical role in the company's development and provided me with a settlement figure that was significantly, exponentially larger than the original bonus offer, although still a fraction of what my family members were receiving. Crucially, it included a clause that prevented them from publicly misrepresenting my role in the founding and development of the company in the future. It wasn't the billions they got, but it was enough to validate my worth, secure my future, and send a clear message. Signing the agreement felt bittersweet. I had fought for my truth, and I had won a significant victory, both financially and morally. But the cost was the complete destruction of my relationship with my family. They saw the settlement not as justice, but as me taking their money under duress. The betrayal became a chasm that couldn't be crossed. The acquisition went through shortly after the settlement was finalized. The $2.5 billion changed hands. My family became incredibly wealthy. I became financially secure, far beyond anything I had imagined just a few years prior, but without the family I had built the dream with. The narrative they continued to promote within their circle was that I had extorted them, that I was greedy and had tried to sabotage their success. I heard whispers, saw the cold stares from relatives who had sided with them. It hurt, but it didn't break me. I knew the truth. I had stood up for myself. I used some of the settlement money to start my own venture, something entirely mine, built on my own terms, with a team built on trust and mutual respect. I invested wisely and continued to build my career and my life, independent of my family's validation or resources. The years that followed were about healing. Healing from the betrayal, the gaslighting, the feeling of being erased. It was a painful process. There were moments of doubt, of loneliness, mourning the loss of the family I thought I had. But there were also moments of profound strength and clarity. I had faced down immense pressure, stood firm in my truth against the people who had immense power over me, and emerged with my integrity intact. I learned that true worth doesn't come from external validation, especially not from people who are willing to sacrifice your dignity for their gain. It comes from knowing your contributions, standing in your truth, and building a life that reflects your values. My relationship with my family is non-existent now. We are strangers, connected only by a shared, painful history and a vast sum of money that simultaneously fulfilled a dream and shattered a family. I don't regret fighting back. Accepting their narrative would have been a far greater loss than any financial gain could ever compensate for. I fought for my place in history, for my right to say, I built that. Revealing their corruption, their willingness to lie and manipulate for money, was the only way I could reclaim my story. It wasn't easy, and the scars remain. But I am free. Free from their control, their narrative, their toxic definition of family. In the end, the $2.5 billion didn't bring happiness or unity to my family. It exposed the cracks, widened them into canyons, and revealed the uncomfortable truth about who they were when faced with unimaginable wealth. And it forced me to discover who I was when faced with unimaginable betrayal. I am Emily. I built a multi-billion-dollar company, and I refuse to be erased. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand up to family members or people you loved for your truth, please share your experience in the comments below. Hearing your stories helps us all feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating complex relationships and finding your voice. Thank you again for being here.